For us Americans, Appalachia was the centerpiece of post-2016 election news coverage. Most news networks quickly labeled the region Trump country, and reporters flocked to the mountains in droves to understand what the people who elected him were like, who these forgotten white working-class people were that swung an election. Here's a little background. The region of the U.S. commonly referred to as Appalachia is a stretch of mountains that run from Alabama in the south all the way through Maine and into Canada. The region commonly gets divided further into three sections: Southern Appalachia, which is Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi; Central Appalachia, which is North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia; and Northern Appalachia, which is everything north of the Mason-Dixon line. These regions vary by industry, income, and racial demographics. The term Trump country typically refers to Central Appalachia, and this region is also commonly called coal country, as that was the industry that dominated the area for over 5 decades. Now, of course, there are a lot of stereotypes when it comes to Appalachia and the people that live there. The racism, the extreme poverty, and the drug epidemic all exist, and it's hard to have a nuanced discussion about the region and the literary works that come from it without understanding where these social ills come from. Now, this introduction is already much too long as it is, so we'll have to summarize the extremely complex history of Appalachia, which causes this, into one sentence, and that is that both the land and the people of Appalachia have been systematically oppressed and exploited for well over a century. So now to dive into the actual meat of what I want to talk about: third space in Appalachian literature. Third space is kind of a difficult topic to understand, and that's why I want to use biscuits as a metaphor for it. So Edward Soja describes third space in his 1996 work by the same name as a method of considering a space where everything comes together, arguing that space should be considered based on a trilectic of spatiality, historicality, and sociality. Now, that's a lot, so consider this picture of a biscuit. Our spatial or first space understanding of this biscuit would be how we physically see it, how we would represent it if we were to draw it. Now, our social or second space understanding of the biscuit might include the ideas of the biscuit as a symbol for comfort food or southern cooking, for a good home-cooked meal. Finally, we consider the historicality of the biscuit, and this is probably the most difficult part of third space, because everyone will have experienced this biscuit, or the space it's a metaphor of, differently. So if I were to bake this biscuit for you, our historical understanding would be quite different. You would, of course, know that I made it for you, but you would not understand the work that went into making it as I do. But by bringing all of this together, we form a third space understanding of the biscuit. Now, to apply this to literature, when we consider third space in the setting of a story or stories, we examine the way the story impacts our understanding of that setting. So, what I want to see is how this idea of third space can inform our vision of Appalachia, and I want to do it by looking at 2 books, J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy and Ron Rash's Serena. So, to say that Vance has poor feelings about Appalachia would be an understatement. Now, Elizabeth Katz's What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia is a direct response to Vance and the way he characterizes the region, and I would highly suggest reading it. What Vance wants his readers to walk away with is an image of a region full of people who have no desire to help themselves. Take this passage, for example. People talk about hard work all the time in places like Middleton. You can walk through a town where 30% of young men work fewer than 20 hours a week and find not a single person is aware of his own laziness. Now, in Elegy, there's little recognition for the factors that create an environment like this because it's unimportant to Vance's story. The sins of the past are unimportant, only the present hypocrisy, and that makes it difficult to consider third space in Vance's work. In this case, I would suggest we consider Vance's own history in the region as a method of understanding. See, Vance sees little in Appalachia besides welfare queens and drug addicts, which is curiously the 2 traits that best define his mother. As he sees it, dependence on government aid has crippled the people of Appalachia and their ability to address the economic decline of the region. However, as Vance prepares to leave for basic training, he notes that he knows his grandmother will likely not be there when he returns in 4 years, and that when he leaves his home, he'll be leaving it for good. And this betrays that while Vance may show disdain for the people of the region, the people are still what defines it for him. They're a reflection of the land. And this image of people serving as a reflection of the land appears in Serena as well. One of the major conflicts of the novel is the founding of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and Serena and her husband, who are lumber barons, own land that will eventually be claimed under eminent domain for the park. Now, with this inevitability, Serena devises a plan to clear the land fast enough so they won't lose any of their profits. Compare this with the perspective of the workers who clear the land. They are quite literally destroying the land that is their home, and just as this land is breaking, they are too. Logging is one of the most dangerous professions, and the entire second act of Serena is marked by the deaths or severe injury of almost every single named character who is a logger in the story. The land that once nourished these laborers is now killing them, And this is interesting when we view it alongside the detail that Rash puts into describing the natural world of Serena. Alongside the violence and the destruction are passages about cool, clear water rolling over granite creek beds and the quiet serenity of the peaks of the mountains that surround the events of the story. And this element of tragic beauty drives us to understand the people within the tragedy as well, and it sets a dark tone for the future. So while Vance and Rash are talking about two very different periods in Appalachian history, when we bring them together, we can make some interesting conclusions. First, the physical space of Appalachia was not the only thing damaged by the exploitation of the land. The people were destroyed also. This is seen in the world Vance describes in Elegy. It's a world where the coal and timber industries have largely abandoned the region, and nothing has taken their place, leaving most of the workers without jobs. And two, the world which Vance describes, our current Appalachia, was inevitable. The jobless people he describes in the passage we looked at before are the same people that Rash writes about in Serena. The times have changed, but the social and economic systems that oppress them remain. When we consider the impacts of the history which Rash explores in Serena, and the society that created as a result described by Vance, we see the complete story of a region and the polarizing views it creates. And this is kind of the point of Third Space, to examine the ways different people interact with and experience the space and the meaning that gives it. Rash embraces the history of the region in his work, and Vance rejects it. Here's where I want to make a snarky joke about how it should be no surprise that a complex region like Appalachia breeds complex attitudes in the minds of its inhabitants, but I find it really neat that we can discern a pretty large truth from just a 7 or so minute look at two books. I hope you do too. Anyways, thanks for watching.